Now let's take a quick look at some other popular material types in 3ds Max. Now I'm going to go back into my compact material editor here, and I'm going to select an empty slot here. And let's go through some of the other materials that we can work with in 3ds Max. So I'm going to go ahead and just click on this material here, and let's go ahead and just call it teapot. And select the teapot and assign it. So let's take a tour of the other various materials. So a lot of them are containers for other materials. So I'm going to go ahead and select the material type. And under materials, you can see that we have a number of these. The first one I'm going to select is probably the most unique, and that's the ink and paint material. So I'm going to go ahead and select that. As you can see, we can select a paint color. We can also turn on ink and create a width and height. And if we do a quick render, you'll see that we get that ink and paint effect. Now, one of the interesting things about this is that it will reflect as well, so you can use it with other materials if you want. Now, another important material is what's called the blend material. So I'm going to go up to blend, and I'm going to discard old material. So this gives me a blank slate. And what this material has is actually two materials as the input, and then a mask that controls how those two materials blend. So this is a little complex. In fact, I'm going to go into my slate material editor so we can see how this works here. I'm going to double click on teapot, and you'll notice here that we have already three objects here in the scene. So I've got my teapot here, which is my blend material, and feeding into that I have a standard material and another standard material. Now these don't have to be standard materials. We can change these to whatever we want. But I'm going to keep this really simple, and I'm just going to create two different colors. So I'm going to go ahead and make one kind of a blue, and then I'm going to double click on this material 27, and let's go ahead and make this a red. So now I have these two materials, but how they interact is controlled by the mask. So if I double click on this and go into these parameters, we have to create a mask. Now this mask determines how those two blend. So I'm going to click on this, and it brings me into a material map browser. And in this case, I can select any different type of map. So if I wanted a gradient, the gradient would control the blend from black to white, and the gradient would go from one material to the other. Something like marble or noise could also do that. Now I'm going to do something a little bit more sophisticated, and I'm going to use what's called a fall-off map. Now a fall-off map controls how the light affects the material. So as you can see here in this little shader ball here, when the fall off is perpendicular and parallel, when you're viewing the object straight on, it's one color, and when you're at the edge, it's the other, because the light rays are perpendicular in one of those directions and parallel in another. We can change this to any different type. We can change it to what's called towards or away. We can use a Fresnel, which is a lens type effect, or we could say that if it's in shadow, then make it one color. If it's in light, make it the other color. And this is not just color, it's material. So we can change from one material to another. Now I'm going to keep this at perpendicular and parallel. Let's go back into our compact material editor. See this? And you probably won't see this in the viewport. But if we turn on high quality, we still don't really see it. So what we need to do is actually do a render. So I'm going to go ahead and just do a quick render production. And as you can see, I'm getting one material in one direction, and the other material in the other. So when I see the object perpendicular, it's one color, and when the rays are parallel, it's another one. So let's go ahead and create another new material. The next material is pretty simple. It's called top and bottom. And really, it's very similar to blend, but it's a much simpler paradigm. So we have two materials, and one is the top material, the other is the bottom. Now I'm going to do this in the compact material editor here. And so let's do the same thing. Let's go ahead and make one a different color. So we're going to have yellow. And notice how the top of this is yellow. I'm going to go to parent, go to my second material, and let's just make this red. And then go to parent. So now I've got this teapot material which contains two submaterials. One is a yellow color, the other is a red color. Now if I do a quick render of this, you can see it here. You can see that anything that's on the quote-unquote bottom will be one color and the other color will be the other. Or actually not just color, but material. Now we can also blend between these so we can kind of create more of a gradient effect as well. So again, if we do a render, you can see we get more of a soft edge. So that's top bottom. Now the next one is what's called double-sided. Now for this one, I'm going to again discard the old material, but on the teapot, I'm going to select my teapot, go to modify, and I'm going to turn off the lid so that we can see inside that teapot. Now again, we have two materials for this, a facing material and a back material. Any geometry that's facing the camera will be one material. Any geometry that's facing away from the camera will be another material. Now this will depend on the normals that you have. So in this case, I'm going to make my facing material, let's make it kind of a cyan. And then my back material, I'll make that kind of a dark blue. So when I do a quick render of this, you'll see that anything that's facing me is a cyan color. Anything that's far away, the back material, is the dark blue. Now finally, we also have what's called a multi-sub-object material. So I'm going to select that and then discard the old material. So now we're working with multi-sub-object. Now a multi-sub-object material applies itself to parts of the mesh. So you can define what parts of the mesh are what material. So I'm going to turn the lid back on this object here. And I'm going to go into these submaterials. Now notice this multi-sub-object material has a set number of materials. So right now it's at 10, but we can change that number if we want. And each submaterial has its own slot. So if I can select slot ID 1, I can put in, say, a standard material, click OK, and I can make that a color. So let's go ahead and just make that, say, a blue type of color. Now this whole object is by default material 1. But let's say we wanted to make the lid and just the lid a different color. Well, in this case, we have to go in and edit this. So I'm going to go into my teapot. I'm going to add in an edit poly or an edit mesh modifier. And then I'm going to go into element. So I'm going to go ahead and select the lid, which is its own element. And I want those polygons to be a different material. Now if I scroll down to polygon material IDs, you'll notice that the ID of this is 1. But if I change this to 2, notice when I click off of this, it goes black. And that's because I don't have anything in the number 2 slot. So if I want to, I can add in another material. Let's just go ahead and stick with standard. And there we go. Now we have another material, material number 2, which is the color of just that material. So if I go up here, you'll see that ID number 1 is the blue, and that's most of the teapot. ID number 2 is just the lid. So as you can see, we can go through and on a polygon by polygon basis, apply materials as needed. Now this will work with any type of submaterial. So if you want to do this with physical materials, great. If you want to do it with ink and paint, you can do it. So as you can see, we have a number of categories of materials that allow you to take submaterials and blend them, mix them, and apply them however you want.